Mayflower, a story of courage, community, and war by author Nathaniel Philbrick. Nonfiction, history specifically as to the pre-colonization period for what would eventually become the United States. A book written in 2006, and a meaty read. I have 413 pages on this one. I have been looking back at some of my Shelf Life episodes and saying to myself, ooh, am I going on too long with them? Maybe they should be shorter. So I've kind of come up with a more organized way of approaching them. And to have this book come up makes that really difficult. I have such a hard time telling you my favorite this thing or that thing. This is one of my, if not the favorite book that I have. I don't know how I came across that this was a thing. However, I would also go so far as to say this is probably the most famous of all the books that I've got. So there's a good chance some of you out there have actually read this yourselves. What is it about? It is about people who were known as Puritans becoming a different people who we more famously actually know as pilgrims, coming to the New World at the time and establishing roots at places like Plymouth Rock. It is their story told with a lot of their own writings, and it is mind-blowing to me. When are we going to think about Mayflower? When are we going to think about the Pilgrims? Here in the United States, those things come to mind usually around the same time. Thanksgiving. And of course, this is April that this episode is coming out, so we could almost not be too much further from Thanksgiving at this point. But what happens? You got the little kids. They make the little handprint turkeys, of course. And then you've got the cute cartoon figures with some people who have hats with buckles on them, and other people have face paint and feathers in their head. And we all know it's a little simplistic, but we also learn. We know exactly what happened. We know that the Puritans were living in England and that they were being persecuted because of their Puritan religion. And so they said, forget it, we need to find a place where there's nothing but religious freedom. And, let's go to this new world. We get on this boat called the Mayflower, and we get there, and we make roots, and we meet Squanto, and we have this feast. And everything's happy and dandy, and there's the Mayflower Compact, and next thing you know, from this one seed buds the flower of the United States of America. And then, of course, as soon as that idea starts getting passed around, there's always somebody, very, very likely might be me, who's like, yeah, well, those pilgrims also were just going around slaughtering Native Americans at the same time. So they couldn't have been all that great. And hey, how about the diseased blankets being passed around, right? So I knew those two angles, I guess you could call them. And then I read this book. And then I found out neither one of those is correct. The trip wasn't from England to the US, quite like we think. There's a really important holdover in between there that I don't remember ever learning about in school. And the writings from these people who we think of as these pilgrims, well, let me tell you, these pilgrims are absolute jackasses. They are terrible people. And I never knew that. I never knew that it wasn't about religious freedom because they experienced it elsewhere and they didn't like it. Instead, they were all about creating their own style of theocracy somewhere where they could. And that really changes things up. So it was a not so direct trip from one place to the other, and the pilgrims weren't who we think they are. Hell, I mentioned Squanto. Squanto's not who I thought he was either. I just thought this was a cool guy who said, you know what? Let's help out these white folk. They don't know what they're doing out here. They don't know how to grow maize or anything like that. Let's show them. And then it turns out, no, Squanto was looking to take control over his own tribe and figured he might fool these white weirdos into helping him out with that. And at times they almost did, but it turns out that the chief of Squanto was a little smarter than Squanto himself, as far as I could tell. I have to cut myself off from just talking about this book so much because I love it so much. I'm hoping my enthusiasm is coming through. Like I said, this is probably my favorite book. It's this or Stiff or another book that I haven't covered yet called Polio: An American Story. Those are my three elite. What about critiques, though? Well, being such a popular book, there's a ton of critiques to look through. And I'm definitely going to share them with you, but we got to address something that honestly, I feel like more and more has to be addressed. There's a lot of more recent reviews about this book. I don't know why. I don't know if it was reissued. However, I can tell the reviews are much more recent because I see a particular word a lot in the negative ones. Woke. If you're somebody who thinks the word woke is a monster in your closet, why are you even listening to this show? You're not intelligent. You need to become a smarter person, and I'm sorry to be so rude about it. But there's nothing wrong with being woke. It's just being more informed and then you deciding what, if anything, you want to do about something you learned. That's it. Grow up. But you get a lot of political reviews on this one because of that classic Thanksgiving fight between those two different angles. You see those appear in the critiques, and again, you see it on both sides. There's some people who are like, man, why are we talking about these pilgrims this way? They were looking for freedom. Look what they did. The Mayflower Compact is sort of like progenitor to the American Constitution. You can't hate that. And then you got the other side like, okay, we're talking about their relationship being positive with the Native Americans, but is that really the case? Didn't they fight with that tribe to kill off a whole bunch of others? And on and on and on. Neither side is exactly wrong, but for some reason they feel compelled to only look at one half of the side. Like, see the whole board, the whole thing. That one tree is by a bunch of other trees and they make up the forest. So you can review the whole thing. I did find some criticisms that I thought were confusing. There's a lot of people who say that, it's over 400 pages, it's very scholarly, it's very dry, and it's just tough to get through. And then other people are saying, God, I just wanted something that was objective and scholarly and detailed, and this one's too story-like. There's too much vividness to it. So I guess that makes sense to have happened for a well-known book like this. You're going to get people who feel sucked into something that they weren't actually trying to read, and it just wound up not being their type of book, I guess. I don't know. I just don't feel like that's a great criticism. If you want to say something is scholarly or say something is too story-like, that's more of a point of info for future readers, not necessarily a this is why this book isn't good. However, there is one piece of criticism that I saw quite a bit that in hindsight I go, oh yeah, that actually is a worthwhile point. It has to do with the title, Mayflower. It certainly sounds like a lot of people were purchasing this book with the understanding that it would be what was the history of the ship known as Mayflower, as well as a book covering the journey of the Mayflower to the New World with the Pilgrims aboard it. That's here. That is the first, I would say, third of the book, maybe quarter of the book. That is here. They did get that. But that also means that the majority of the book is not about that. When they get to Plymouth Rock, and once they actually get off the boat and they start creating their settlement, you're pretty much done with the Mayflower. You're not going to hear it or talk about it anymore. Hell, I don't even know, I don't remember off the top of my head if they even kept the ship intact. They might have dismantled it to use it to create this settlement, which is not an uncommon thing to do. I don't remember for certain. It might have just shipped back as well. But it's no longer about the Mayflower at that point for the majority of the book. And instead, it's about the settlement at Plymouth Rock, interrelationships with the native tribes that were near them, what their plans were for their settlement, and a whole hefty amount of it about something that I don't feel like we learn a lot in our history classes. Maybe in the New England area you probably do, but King Philip's War. And I think that is a really good point. I can understand somebody seeing this title and making that particular assumption. I can't say no, they're wrong to that. I can tell you that even though I see that criticism, I think they were still trying to say what the influence is of that Mayflower trip into those later events. That's at least the way that I took it. Another option for you is to just read that part of the book and know what else is in there in case you want to read about that from a different angle as well, since it is so focused on what were the remnants of what we think of as the Pilgrims doing for King Philip's War. So I hope I managed to keep myself somewhat in line here, even though I know I just insulted a ton of people out there, but you know what? I don't feel bad about that in the slightest. So you guys are free to insult me all you want because, I don't know, that's life. Read it if you want. I think it's great, and I think you're great, even those of you that I just made fun of. Bye, guys.